I'm at the Cambridge Innovation Center with Maya Heymann. And Maya has been active in the startup community, both in Boston and Palo Alto. She's been an investment banker, and she is now a senior managing director of Common Angels Ventures in Boston, where she's been since 2013. She's a graduate of Wellesley, and we're delighted to welcome her to our Isenberg class.
Thank you.
So this is for our entrepreneurial finance course. And I wonder if you would begin by explaining to our students what Common Angels is and how does it work?
Happy to, Charlie. So Common Angels is we have been on an evolution. We started out nearly 16 years ago as an angel group, and just the last 2 years we evolved ourselves to an angel fund. So the difference, let me back up. The definition of an angel is someone who invests his or her own personal money, and that's juxtaposed to a venture capitalist who invests other people's money. And so what we decided to do as an angel group is to combine and consolidate our individuals' money into a fund. So it has elements that are similar to a venture capital fund in that the capital is pooled, but the capital does still come from individuals, also known as angels. And to sum it up, what makes us unique is that our capital comes from the angels who have invested in our fund are themselves entrepreneurs, founders who have started, built, and sold their own companies. They're all leaders in the technology community, and we've pooled the capital so when we invest in a company, that company receives one check from our fund.
So when I first dealt with Common Angels, in fact, I represented Xconomy when they received their funding from Common Angels. It was a group of individuals who met on a monthly basis. Companies would come in and present.
That's right. And
then individuals would decide whether they wanted to invest in the target company. That's changed.
That has changed. And the Xconomy is an example of how we worked previously. And that's a good one to juxtapose. So we have, in a sense, flipped the model. So when a company now comes and presents and we decide to move forward, the company is getting one large check from the fund. And if there are a handful of individuals who want to co-invest alongside the fund, we enable that. But the model has actually flipped. And in Xconomy's case, the prior fund, that was Common Angels Fund 2, the fund invested there, but probably 2/3 of the capital came from individuals and only 1/3 came from the fund. Now it's the opposite. 2/3 comes from the fund or 100% comes from the fund.
So you're investing in very early stage companies.
Well, there's a spectrum.
Yes or no?
I would say no.
No. Okay.
Look, the nomenclature is changing. Early stage used to be what a Series A is.
Right.
And now you're hearing the term seed, and now you're even hearing the term pre-seed. So early stage is how one defines that. I think a different way to think about it is pre-product. Is there just a vision and no product? Is product built, but they haven't figured out repeatable, scalable sales and marketing? And that's what the capital is to fund. I will answer your question. We are early stage.
Early stage. And how much money are you investing typically in a deal?
And that depends on the stage of the company. So if a company is still pre-product, but it may range from $250K. But if product is built and the company is in market and is selling, we may invest up to $1 million, like we just did with a company called Help Scout. Where we invested $1 million in that company.
So what are some of the qualities of the companies that you're looking for?
I love that question because it is it directs back to the entrepreneur. So I'll rephrase your question and say, what qualities are we looking for in the entrepreneur?
Well, that was my next question.
Yeah, right. Well, I'll combine the two of them then. So because they're interrelated. So there are very few new ideas out there, right? Most everything has, every once in a while, a brand new idea comes along. But that's pretty rare. What is important is how well a founding team or the founder understands the problem they're trying to solve and how they have built a solution around that, how well they can execute. So those are all people things, not necessarily product things. And I like to advise founders around being able to communicate what makes them uniquely qualified to do what they're trying to do.
So I had a little video conversation with David Fialco of General Catalyst, and
Sure.
David made the argument that he thought that first-time entrepreneurs like Mark Zuckerberg, like Stephen Jobs, like many others that he cited, have a quality of passion, and that people who have been around the block a number of times don't, and that all things being equal, that's the kind of entrepreneur, that's the stage of the entrepreneur that he likes to invest in. Do you agree?
Well, if we could all find the next Mark Zuckerbergs and Steve Jobs, of course we would. I think so. Right. So though they are exceptional and very rare. Most of us are all mere mortals. But was he suggesting the experienced entrepreneur, someone who had, or was he suggesting something about the uniqueness of their passion and vision?
I think he was focusing on the fact that you've got somebody who is driven by a passion for a particular product or a particular company, and that's their orientation, as opposed to somebody who is a professional entrepreneur or a multiple-time entrepreneur. Anyway.
Well, I think that's interesting because I think you need both. I think what does a professional entrepreneur mean, right? What does that mean? I think
maybe somebody who's done it a few times,
right? And who has hired and fired, who has built teams, who's figured out how to garner resources he or she doesn't have. I mean, that's kind of the definition of entrepreneurship. You can have brilliant vision, but if you can't figure out how to build a team behind you to help you execute the team, if you can't raise capital, that's what entrepreneurship is.
Right.
In addition to the vision, right? You have to execute.
So what are some of the common mistakes that you see some of the entrepreneurs who are coming to you make when they're looking for investment capital?
One of the most common mistakes is they gloss over who they are and, again, what makes them uniquely qualified to be starting a company in a particular space with a particular solution. And instead of spending time on describing their background, they tend to jump right to the product, right to the solution. And again, investors back people. So the number, and look, it can be uncomfortable. You feel like you're bragging if you talk about your accomplishments, but the number one job of an entrepreneur is to communicate that trust. As an entrepreneur, you're selling trust. Why would an investor trust you and invest in you? And that's, I think, probably the number one mistake. Entrepreneurs just jump. They love to talk about their product, which is wonderful, right? We want to hear about the product, but we also, I think, before we want to hear about the product, or it doesn't have to be before, but at some point, the founder has to figure out how to communicate why, again, they're the best person on the planet to execute on that vision with this plan that they've proposed.
So would you be willing to share with us some of your favorite questions to ask entrepreneurs as you're getting to know them?
Well, it's very case specific. I mean, without a doubt, I will always ask more about a founder's background than um, than usually they've allotted.
And you're looking for
exceptionalism. So what is it about that entrepreneur's background, their learnings, their insights, how they're wired, that is going to figure out what is it about their background that enables them to figure out how to succeed in a very tough world. And then there is another thing I'll share that I've just garnered over the years, especially with software companies, with tech companies. Entrepreneurs, founders love to talk about the technology because that's what they're passionate about. That's what they built. Not so much about distribution, sales, and marketing. So, in a sense, while as hard as it is to build the technology, it's even harder to sell it and to displace competitors and to figure out repeatable and scalable sales and marketing. So that's the other question that sort of founder and then founder's background and how are you going to sell it? How are you going to win in a very competitive marketplace?
So we've got a classroom full of students who are enjoying this conversation. We hope anyway. And what would you advise them as they think about whether they want to pursue entrepreneurship in whatever way, and what kind of self-assessment do you think that they should make, particularly in the context of some of these things that you've talked about that you look for?
We are in what is this, August of 2015. And entrepreneurship is cool again. It's sexy. It's where, a lot of people want to go right now. And I've seen this ebb and flow. This is now the third time where the industry has cycled. It was very cool in the 90s. It was cool again in the in 07. Then not so cool. And now we're back again where entrepreneurship is cool. And it looks easy. I've got an idea. I raised some money, and I know I'm a little Debbie Downer here, but it's hard. It's entrepreneurship is hard, and I think right now we're in a phase in the macro economy where there's lots of discussion in the media about the successes, very little discussion about the failures. And so I think my advice is dig deep, look hard, make sure you're wanting to get into entrepreneurship for the right reasons. And the right reasons can be different for different people, but make sure that at the core, you have the intestinal fortitude to deal with a lot of things that don't work and then iterate. And that doesn't work. You're going to hit walls, and you have to be resilient and be able to dig deep and pivot and figure out, okay, that didn't work. What will work?
So if I may, let me ask a little bit about you and about about your job as a venture capitalist or an angel investor. What keeps you up at night?
I think that's an excellent question for the entrepreneur to hear. What keeps me up at night is I need to generate returns for my investors. So, and I've spent years being an angel investor myself, and that when it's my own money, writing those checks, I care about the success of those companies and doing whatever I can to help with value creation. When I've raised money from other investors and my investors have looked me in the eye to say, I trust you, Maya, I'm going to commit to your fund. That's what keeps me up at night in terms of how do I help the companies that we've chosen to invest in, how do we help those companies succeed? So my my ultimate objective is to generate outsized returns for my investors. And the way I do that is finding and earning the privilege to back exceptional entrepreneurs who are going to create valuable companies. And that's how I'll generate a return. So hands down, that's the ultimate goal. And then in implementation, it's trying to figure out how to help each and every company every single day. And help, what does help mean? So help means connections to prospective customers. Help means connections to new hires. Help means connection to potential partnerships, potential distribution partners, things like that.
So finally, what career advice might you have for my students, and perhaps particularly the female students who might be considering the venture capital industry? We know that there have been challenges for some women over the years, and not enough women in the venture capital industry. And so what advice do you have for my students?
Venture capital or investing is still an apprenticeship type business. I think there's a tremendous amount of blogs and fabulous information that one can read, both sides of the table. Mark Suster, Brad Feld has done a tremendous amount of blogging and writing. So there's lots of information to educate oneself. But what I mean by it's still an apprenticeship business is I think you have to go through that process of finding companies, plural, investing, deciding to make the investment, and then that growth process of seeing which ones pan out and which ones don't, and that pain of being wrong. You will be wrong many times, and that's why it's important to build a diversified portfolio, because you can't, if we could all pick the winners, then right, but it's impossible because of market forces, exogenous forces. So whether it's a female or a male, a man or woman looking to get into the business, figure out how you can do that work in apprenticeship, whether it's working at 2, 3, 4 startups, and building your track record on the entrepreneurial side and then deciding to become an investor, or starting out as an entry-level person in a venture firm as an analyst, doing the legwork of sourcing companies, meeting with companies, and then post-investment, how do you help those companies?
Now, you started as a investment banker.
I did.
Would you,
in tech.
With a view toward becoming a venture capitalist, would you have done it differently if you had to do it all over again?
I would not have done it differently. Prior to being an investment banker, I was a corporate banker in tech. So that for me was a fabulous route, because every company's story gets told through its financials. And the discipline I learned about the story of financials can tell about a company. So I banked public and private tech companies. This was 10 years out in Silicon Valley. And I only worked with technology companies. So I saw lots of different verticals within tech, or subsectors within tech. And I was exposed to a lot of different companies, a lot of successes, and also saw failures. I mean, saw companies that could have raised money, and they were public, actually, and they wouldn't do a secondary until this famous story. I'm not going to raise money until my stock price has a 2 in front of it. Well, that company doesn't exist anymore, because CEO wouldn't raise money at $17 a share. He had to do it at $20, and he missed his window. So I think finding opportunities where you can see an industry at a little bit of a landscape level helps you understand that industry it gives you a vantage point to understand an industry and understand lots of subsectors, and that's a great way for anyone to start.
Well, Maya, thank you so much. Great insights and thought.
Yeah.
And
thank you for having me, Charlie. My pleasure.
Thank you.